What is reality? How do we know what is true and what is false? How do we use language and images to communicate and manipulate reality? And how do we use philosophical teachings on truth in our photography as we strive to capture and express reality in our own way? All this and more in this episode of Philosopher, Photographer. Let's start with one of the most influential and controversial philosophers of the modern era, René Descartes. Descartes was a French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist who lived in the 17th century. He is considered the father of modern philosophy and the founder of rationalism, a school of thought that emphasizes the use of reason and logic to discover the truth. Descartes was famous for his method of doubt, which he used to question everything that he had learned or believed until he could find something that he could not doubt. He wanted to find a solid foundation for his knowledge, something that he could be certain of. He's the one that famously said, "I think, therefore I am." This means that the only thing that he could not doubt was his own existence as a thinking being. Descartes also doubted the reliability of his senses because he realized that they could deceive him. He used the example of dreaming, where he could see, feel, hear, and taste things that were not real. He also used the example of optical illusions, where he could see things that were not as they appeared. He wondered if he could ever trust his senses to tell him the truth about the reality of the external world. So, how can we use Descartes' philosophy in our photography? Well, one way is to use composition to create images that challenge our perception of truth and reality, and that make us question what we see. We can also use composition to create images that show the difference between appearance and reality, or between illusion and truth. For example, we can photograph a scene that looks different from different angles, or that changes depending on the lighting or the perspective. We can also photograph a scene that contains elements that are not what they seem, such as reflections, shadows, or mirages. Now let's move on to Nietzsche, who wrote an essay called On Truth and Lies in a Non-Moral Sense in 1873. In this essay, he argues that human language and knowledge are not based on objective reality, but on metaphors, symbols, and illusions that we create to make sense of the world. He says that truths are illusions, which we have forgotten are illusions. He also distinguishes between two types of lies, those that are conscious and intentional, and those that are unconscious and unintentional. He considers the latter to be more dangerous than the former because they distort our perception of reality without us being aware of it. How does this thinking apply to photography? One way to look at it is that photography is also a form of language and knowledge that uses metaphors, symbols, and illusions to represent reality. A photograph, while a physical object in reality, is not reality itself, but a representation of it, filtered through the lens, the camera settings, the editing software, and the photographer's vision. A photograph can also be a lie, either conscious or unconscious, depending on how the photographer manipulates the image and the viewer's expectations. For example, a photographer can use techniques such as cropping, framing, lighting, color, contrast, perspective, focus, or distortion to create a certain mood, message, or impression that may not correspond to the actual scene or situation. A photographer can also use software or other tools to enhance or remove elements from the image, making it more or less realistic. How can we use Nietzsche's philosophy to improve our photography? One way is to be aware of the limitations and possibilities of photography as a medium, and to use it creatively and responsibly to express our own vision of reality. Another way is to be critical and skeptical of the photographs that we see and consume, and to question their sources, motives, and intentions. A third way is to experiment with different styles and techniques of photography, and to challenge ourselves and our viewers with different perspectives and interpretations of reality. Consider also what you've learned about Plato's allegory of the cave in the first episode of Philosopher, Photographer. Now we can understand how this allegory can also apply to truth in photography. You see, one way to look at it is that photography is also a form of copying or shadowing reality, and that there is a higher realm of reality that photography cannot capture or express. A photograph is not the thing itself, but a reflection or a projection of it, and it may not reveal the true essence or meaning of the thing. A photograph can also be a prison if we limit ourselves to what we see and do not question or explore beyond it. For example, a photographer can take a photo of a beautiful landscape but miss the deeper aspects of the place, such as its history, culture, and ecology. As photographers, we should seek the forms or the ideas behind the things that we photograph, and to try to convey them in our images. We should escape the cave and see the world in a different light, and to try to capture and share that experience with our viewers who may still be stuck in the cave. Another way is to educate ourselves and our viewers about the reality behind the photographs, and to encourage them to think and learn more about the subjects that we photograph and the truth that lies behind them. Let's end with Harry G. Frankfurt, who was a contemporary philosopher and professor emeritus at Princeton University. He is best known for his essay on BS, which was published in 1986 and became a bestseller in 2005. In this essay, he analyzes the concept and phenomenon of BS, which he defines as a statement that is made without regard or concern for the truth. He says that BS is different from lying because a liar knows and cares about the truth but tries to conceal it or distort it, while a person spouting BS does not care about the truth at all, but only about making an impression or achieving a goal. Frankfurt says that BS is more prevalent and more dangerous than lying because it erodes our respect for trust and the truth, and it undermines our ability to communicate and reason effectively. How does this apply to photography? Well, one way to look at it is that photography can also be a form of BS if it's done without regard or concern for the truth. A photograph can be BS if it's manipulated or fabricated to create a false or misleading impression or message. A photographer can be BSing if he or she does not care about the truth or the ethics of photography, but only cares about the popularity or the profit of his or her images. A viewer can be a victim of BS if he or she is deceived or influenced by the BS photographs and loses his or her sense of reality and judgment. Think of the ways in which AI is being used at this very moment to create and manipulate people into believing things that did not happen. So how can we use Frankfurt's philosophy to improve our photography? One way is to avoid BS in our photography and to be honest and responsible with our images and our viewers. Another way is to detect and expose BS in other people's photography and to be critical and skeptical of the images that we see and consume. A third way is to appreciate and promote truth in photography and to use our images to reveal and share the reality and the beauty of the world. These are just some examples of how we can capture truth in our photography. Of course, there are many other ways to interpret and apply these philosophies, and I encourage you to leave a comment and share with our community how you have experimented to find your own interpretations. We have reached the end of this episode of Philosopher, Photographer. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. I also hope you feel inspired to use these philosophies as tools to shape your perception of truth and reality in photography, and to explore some of the philosophical questions and debates that surround them. Remember, truth and reality can be both objectively fixed or absolute, as well as relative and subjective. The latter depends on our senses, our reason, our experience, and our perspectives, as those two, despite being subjective experiences, are occurrences in reality. Accurately reflecting reality also depends on our choices and our intentions, as well as our expressions. As photographers, we have the power and the responsibility to create and communicate our perceptions of truth and reality as we see them, and to make them as clear and effective as possible to the best of our abilities. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you've missed episode 1, go and check it out now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.